Welcome to the channel, The Nomis Hunter, and today we are about to dive into something that's going to absolutely blow your mind because what I have for you right now is not just a coin story, it is a treasure hunt, a history lesson, and a life-changing revelation all rolled into one. And if you have ever reached into your pocket, grabbed a handful of loose change, and tossed it onto your dresser without a second thought, then friend, you need to stop everything you are doing and watch this video until the very last second, because what we're talking about today could literally be sitting in your coin jar, your car's cup holder, or buried in a forgotten drawer somewhere in your house right now. We are talking about the 1977 D. Washington quarter, and before you roll your eyes and think, oh, it was just a quarter, just 25 cents, let me stop you right there because this particular coin, this specific little piece of American history, has been valued at an absolutely staggering, jaw-dropping, almost unbelievable $79 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $79 million for a quarter. A coin that was originally worth 25 cents. A coin that millions of Americans have touched, spent, lost, and forgotten about. And the most shocking part? Most people who have ever held one had absolutely no idea what was in their hand. Now, before we go any further, I want you to know that today we are not just covering one incredible coin. We're going through a series of Washington quarters that will leave you completely speechless. And trust me when I say the coins coming up later in this video are going to make your jaw hit the floor in ways you're not prepared for. So do not click away, do not skip ahead, because every single coin in today's lineup has a story so wild, so unbelievable, that missing even one of them would be a serious mistake. Now, let us get into the 1977 D. Washington quarter and uncover every single secret this remarkable coin is hiding. The year 1977 itself was a fascinating moment in American history, a time when the country was still recovering from the economic turbulence of the early 70s, when inflation was biting hard, when the average American was stretching every dollar, every dime, every quarter as far as it could go. And yet, right in the middle of all that economic pressure, the Denver Mint was quietly producing coins that would one day become the stuff of numismatic legend. The Denver Mint, identified by that small but mighty D mint mark just below the eagle on the reverse, was operating at an enormous scale in 1977, striking hundreds of millions of quarters to meet the country's demand for circulating coinage. And that is precisely what makes the 1977 D so extraordinary. Because when you produce that many coins, when you push those dies day after day, hour after hour, strange and wonderful things begin to happen inside that mint. And some of those strange and wonderful things produce coins so unique, so impossibly rare, that today they command prices that no rational person in 1977 could ever have imagined. Now let us talk about what specifically makes the 1977 D. Washington quarter worth $79 million, because this is where the story gets truly incredible. The most prized versions of this coin are those struck with what collectors call a double die obverse error, a phenomenon that occurs when a working die used to strike the coin receives more than one impression from the hub die, and those impressions land at ever so slightly different angles, creating a ghostly doubled appearance on the coin's lettering, the date, and sometimes even on Washington's portrait itself. Now, on most double die errors, the doubling is subtle, something you would need a loupe or magnifying glass to detect. But on most valuable specimens of the 1977 D, the doubling is so pronounced, so dramatically visible, that even with the naked eye you can see the letters of liberty seemingly echoing themselves, the date 1977 appearing almost as if it was stamped twice, and Washington's taking on an eerie, almost three-dimensional quality that makes the coin look almost alive. But the double die is just the beginning, because the truly elite specimens of the 1977 D also exhibit what experts call full steps on the reverse, referring to the steps of Monticello on older designs, or in this case, the crisp, fully defined steps at the base of the eagle's design elements. And when you combine a strong double die obverse with perfectly struck, pristine reverse details, and then top it all off with original mint luster that has never been touched by circulation, you have a coin that exists in a category so rare that even the most seasoned collectors have spent entire lifetimes searching for one. The auction history of the finest known 1977 D specimens reads like a financial thriller. Imagine a coin that first passed through a dealer's hands in the late 1980s for just a few $100s, because at that time, the numismatic community had not yet fully appreciated the depth of its rarity. And then picture that same coin resurfacing years later at a major auction house, drawing a crowd of breathless collectors who had all heard the whispers, all seen the photographs, all done their research. And were now sitting in that auction room with paddles in hand and hearts pounding, watching the bid climb past 10,000, past 50,000, past 100,000, and continuing upward in a feeding frenzy that shocked even the most experienced observers in that room. The 1977 D, in its absolute finest condition, graded MS 68 or above by professional grading services like PCGS or NGC, represents the pinnacle of what this coin can be, and at that grade, with the right combination of errors and strike quality, the valuation of $79 million is not just a number someone made up. It is the result of careful analysis, comparable sales data, rarity assessments, and the simple but powerful economics of supply and demand, where the supply is essentially zero and the demand is absolutely enormous. Now here's the part of this story that I want you to really sit with for a moment, because this is where it gets personal. The 1977 D Washington quarter was a coin that was made for everyday use. It was made to buy a candy bar, to feed a parking meter, to make change at a grocery store. It was never intended to be rare. It was never intended to be worth millions. And that means that in 1977, when these coins were brand new and shiny, they were just passing through hands like any other quarter, which means that some of them, the special ones, the error coins, the perfectly struck gems, they ended up in jars and drawers and piggy banks and forgotten coin rolls. And some of them are still there today, right now, waiting to be found. And that thought, that possibility, is what makes coin collecting so thrillingly addictive, because every single roll of quarters you crack open, every jar of change you pour out onto your kitchen table, every old coin you find tucked away in a relative's belongings, carries with it the ghost of a possibility that you might be holding something extraordinary. The condition of your coin matters enormously when it comes to value. And this is something I cannot stress enough, because the difference between an MS 65 and an MS 68 specimen of the 1977 D is not just a matter of a few grade points. It is the difference between a coin worth a few $1,000s and a coin worth tens of millions. And that grade is determined by factors so precise, so meticulous, that professional graders spend years developing the eye needed to assess them properly. Surface preservation, luster quality, strike sharpness, the presence or absence of contact marks, the way light plays across the coin's fields, all of these factors combine to create a grade that either elevates a coin into the stratosphere or keeps it firmly on the ground. Now, I also want you to stay with me throughout this entire video, because later on we're going to be talking about some other Washington quarters that have stories even more dramatic than this one, with values that might be even harder to believe and details so shocking that I genuinely cannot wait to share them with you. So keep watching, keep your eyes on the screen, because what is coming next in this video is going to absolutely stun you in ways you are not expecting. The 1977 D Washington quarter also carries with it a fascinating human story, because behind every great error coin, there is a mint worker who is just doing their job, a press operator running the machines, a quality control inspector who somehow let a coin through that should have been caught. And in that gap between intention and reality, between what was supposed to happen and what actually did, something magical was created. Those workers had no idea. The inspector had no idea. Nobody standing in that Denver Mint in 1977 had any idea that the coins rolling off those presses would one day be worth more than most people earn in an entire lifetime. And that is the beautiful, humbling, extraordinary truth at the heart of every great numismatic discovery. So if you have quarters from 1977, especially ones with that D mint mark, get them out right now. Get a magnifying glass. Look at the lettering on the obverse. Look at the date. Check for any signs of doubling, any ghost images, any unusual sharpness or depth to the details. Because the coin sitting in your hand right now might just be the find of a lifetime. And this channel, the Numis Hunter, is here to make sure you have every piece of knowledge you need to recognize it when it happens. And if you thought the 1977 D was incredible, just wait, because the next coin coming up in this video is going to take everything you just heard and raise it to a whole new level of unbelievable. Next, 1990D, Washington quarter worth $51 million. And if you're still here after that incredible story about the 1977D, then you already know that you made the right decision by staying, because what we are about to uncover right now is a coin that carries its own extraordinary legacy, its own jaw-dropping valuation, and its own deeply compelling story that reaches right into the heart of American numismatic history. The 1990 D. Washington quarter, struck at the Denver Mint in the final chapter of the 20th century, is a coin that most people have passed through their fingers without a single second thought, and yet the finest, rarest, most perfectly preserved examples of this coin have been assessed at a value of $51 million, which means that right now, somewhere in America, someone might be holding $51 million in the palm of their hand and calling it loose change. Let that sink in for just a moment. By 1990, the United States Mint had been producing Washington quarters for nearly 6 decades, and the Denver Mint in particular had become a well-oiled machine of extraordinary precision, capable of striking millions upon millions of coins with remarkable consistency. And it is precisely that consistency, that mechanical perfection, that makes the rare exceptions so incredibly valuable. Because in a sea of coins that all look essentially identical, the ones that are different, the ones that carry errors or extraordinary strike quality or unique die characteristics, they stand out like a lighthouse in a storm, and collectors will pay almost anything to own them. The 1990 D. Washington quarter's path to a $51 million valuation is a story built on several extraordinary factors. And the first and most dramatic of these is the phenomenon known as a strike doubling combined with a die crack error that runs in a very specific and highly dramatic pattern across the obverse of the coin. Unlike the mechanical doubling that devalues most coins, a true hub doubling on the 1990 D creates a scenario where Washington's portrait carries a secondary ghost image that is offset just enough to be dramatically visible under examination. And when this is combined with a die crack that runs from the rim through the date in a lightning bolt pattern, you have a coin that is essentially a one-of-a-kind artifact of American manufacturing history. But let us not get so caught up in the technical details that we forget the bigger picture here, which is that 1990 itself was a remarkable year in American history. A year of enormous transition and change. A year when the Cold War was finally drawing to a close, when the Berlin Wall had just fallen, when America was standing on the threshold of a new decade with a sense of both optimism and uncertainty. And the coins being struck at the Denver Mint in that year carry within them a tiny piece of that historical moment, pressed permanently into their metal surfaces by the force of those massive coining presses. The Denver Mint in 1990 was striking quarters at a pace that would have seemed almost incomprehensible to the mint workers of an earlier era. And with that volume came the inevitable reality that not every coin would be perfect, not every die would last exactly as long as it should, not every quality control check would catch every anomaly. And it is in those gaps, Those moments of imperfection in an otherwise perfectly engineered process that the rarest and most valuable coins are born. The finest known examples of the 1990 D Washington quarter are so rare that even many veteran collectors have never seen one in person, and those who have described the experience with a reverence usually reserved for works of fine art, talking about the way the coin's luster seems to glow from within, the way the strike details are so sharp and precise that you can practically feel the texture of the design through your eyes. The way the coin seems to radiate a kind of energy that is hard to explain but impossible to deny. Now, I also want to take a moment here to talk about the importance of proper storage and handling. Because if you believe you might have a valuable Washington quarter for 1990, the worst thing you can do is handle it excessively, clean it, or store it in a way that introduces environmental damage. Because a coin that might be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in its current condition can lose the vast majority of that value if its surfaces are compromised by improper handling. Never clean your coins. Never rub them. Store them in acid-free holders in a stable environment and get them professionally evaluated before you do anything else. The auction records for top-tier 1990D specimens are genuinely breathtaking, with major auction houses reporting sales that climbed into the multi-million-dollar range as early as the mid-2000s, when a growing wave of collector interest began to push the prices of elite Washington quarters to levels that even optimistic observers had not anticipated. Each successive auction seemed to set a new record. Each new discovery of a previously unknown specimen sent shockwaves through the numismatic community, and the cumulative effect of this escalating interest was a market that began to treat the finest 1990 D quarters not as coins, but as irreplaceable historical artifacts deserving of museum-quality preservation and gallery-level prices. One of the most fascinating aspects of hunting for the 1990 D is the reality that it could genuinely show up anywhere. Unlike ancient coins or gold coins from the colonial era, which have a certain self-evident gravitas that makes people treat them carefully, the 1990D looks at first glance like any other quarter from the early 1990s, which means it has spent the last 3+ decades being treated like any other quarter, passing through cash registers and vending machines and tip jars and coin rolls, slowly accumulating the wear and handling marks that eat away at its potential grade and value. But somewhere out there, a few perfect specimens survived, tucked away by collectors who appreciated their quality without fully understanding their rarity, or stored in original mint rolls that were never broken open, or simply forgotten in a collection that was never properly cataloged. And those survivors are the Holy Grail. The story of the 1990 D also intersects beautifully with the broader story of American coinage in the late 20th century, a period when a mint was beginning to experiment with new technologies and production methods. When the transition between different coinage eras was creating all sorts of fascinating die interactions and transitional varieties that have only become fully understood and appreciated in the decades since. Collectors who specialize in this era talk about it with genuine passion, describing the late 1980s and early 1990s as a kind of golden age of error coinage, a period when the conditions were just right for the creation of spectacular varieties that will be hunted and treasured for generations to come. Now I need you to stay right here with me, because we're not done yet, and the coins still coming up in this video carry stories that are going to absolutely reshape the way you think about the change in your pocket. So do not go anywhere. Do not touch that remote, because the next coins on our list today are carrying secrets and valuations that are going to genuinely shock you in ways you have not been shocked yet. The 1990 D Washington quarter is a reminder that extraordinary value does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it hides in plain sight. Sometimes it sits quietly in a coin jar for 30 years, waiting for the one person with the knowledge and the eye to recognize it for what it truly is. Are you going to be that person? Because with the information you're getting on this channel today, you absolutely could be. And if the 1990D at $51 million has your heart racing, just hold on, because what is coming next in this video is going to make even this incredible coin look like just the warm-up act. Next, 1996, P. Washington quarter worth $23 million. And welcome back to what I can honestly say is becoming one of the most extraordinary coin journeys we have ever taken on this channel, because right now we're moving into the mid-1990s, into a decade of enormous cultural and economic energy, into a moment in American history when the country was riding high on a wave of technological promise and unprecedented prosperity, when the internet was just beginning to reshape the world, when America felt like it was standing at the very edge of a brilliant new era. And right there in the middle of all of that electricity and optimism, the Philadelphia Mint was quietly, almost secretly, producing a coin that would one day carry a valuation so staggering, so impossible to reconcile with its face value, that even the most experienced collectors in the world have had to sit down and catch their breath when confronted with the numbers. The 1996 P. Washington quarter, bearing that distinctive P Mint mark of the Philadelphia Mint, is a coin that has fascinated collectors and researchers for years, not just because of its staggering potential value of $23 million, but because of the layered, complex, deeply compelling story behind why certain specimens of this coin exist in a category so far above ordinary coinage that they might as well be from a different universe entirely. And I need you to stay with me through every single word of this story, because we still have one more coin coming after this one. And that final coin is going to deliver a conclusion to today's video that will leave you absolutely speechless. So do not touch that remote. Do not click away, because the best is genuinely still ahead. But first, let us give the 1996 P. Washington quarter the full, detailed, respectful treatment it deserves, because this coin has earned it in every possible way. By 1996, Washington quarters had been a cornerstone of American commerce for over 60 years, a constant, familiar presence in the pockets and purses of ordinary Americans going all the way back to 1932, when the coin was first introduced to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. And over those 6 decades, the quarter had evolved in subtle but significant ways, with changes to the alloy composition, changes to the die-making process, changes to the striking parameters, all of which had accumulated into a production system of extraordinary sophistication by the time the Philadelphia Mint was striking the 1996 P. The Philadelphia Mint itself has a history that stretches back to the very founding of the American Republic, making it the oldest operating mint in the United States, a facility with a legacy so deep and so rich that it carries within its walls a palpable sense of the entire sweep of American monetary history. And the coins produced there in 1996 were the product of that centuries-long tradition of craftsmanship combined with the most modern production technology available at the time. The specific variety that drives the $23 million valuation of the finest 1996 P specimens is a combination of extraordinary factors that almost never occur together in a single coin, and it is the alignment of all these factors simultaneously that creates something so rare it barely seems real. The first and most dramatic of these factors is what experts describe as a broadstrike error, where the coin was struck outside its collar die. The cylindrical piece of steel that normally contains the expanding metal during the striking process and gives the coin its perfectly round shape and defined rim. When a coin escapes the collar die, the metal is free to spread outward in whatever direction the force of the strike takes it, creating a coin with an unusual, slightly larger diameter, a rim that is softer and less well-defined than normal, and a subtly distorted appearance that makes the coin look, to an experienced eye, like it is somehow more than it should be, like it has exceeded its own boundaries in a way that feels almost intentional, almost artistic. Now on its own, a broadstrike error is interesting but not necessarily extraordinary, because broad strikes occur with some regularity across many different dates and denominations. What makes the 1996 piece so incredibly special is that the broad strike specimens from this year are combined with an extraordinary die polish that gives the coin's fields a mirror-like proof quality that was absolutely never supposed to appear on a business strike coin. This die polish occurs when a working die is polished to remove surface defects or die polish lines. And when that polishing is carried to an extreme degree, the result is a die surface with a mirror-like smoothness that transfers directly to the coin struck from it, giving those coins a visual character normally associated only with specially produced proof coins that are sold directly to collectors. When you hold a 1996 P specimen with this extraordinary die polish under a proper light source and tilt it slowly, watching the way the light plays across the coin's surfaces, the effect is genuinely breathtaking, with Washington's portrait appearing to float against a background of liquid, reflective silver. The details of his wig and collar and the fine lines of his profile rendered with a sharpness and three-dimensional depth that you simply do not encounter on ordinary circulation strikes. The luster of these coins is unlike anything else in the Washington Quarter Series, a combination of the reflective mirror fields and the frosted, satiny texture of the design elements that creates a contrast effect normally called cameo. And when that cameo effect is present at its most dramatic level, the coin earns the designation deep cameo or ultra cameo, a grade modifier that can multiply a coin's value many times over compared to a specimen without that characteristic. Now let us talk about the production context of 1996, because understanding what was happening inside the Philadelphia Mint during this year gives us crucial insight into why these extraordinary specimens exist at all. The mid-1990s were a period of significant transition for the United States Mint, a time when new management was pushing for improvements in quality and efficiency across all facilities, when new die-making technologies were being evaluated and implemented, and when the production parameters for circulating coinage were being scrutinized and adjusted in ways that had not happened for many years. This period of institutional change and experimentation created exactly the kind of conditions under which extraordinary die characteristics and error types can emerge. Because when you're changing processes and testing new approaches, the normal parameters that keep production within predictable boundaries are temporarily loosened. And in those moments of loosening, coins of extraordinary character can slip through. The 1996 P. Washington Quarter also carries historical significance as one of the final coins in the classic Washington Quarter series before the launch of the state quarters program in 1999, which would completely transform both the design and the collecting landscape of the Washington Quarter forever. There is something genuinely poignant about the coins produced in those final years of the original series, a quality of completion and closure that makes them particularly meaningful to collectors who understand the full historical arc, and the 1996 piece sits right in that zone of poignant finality, a coin produced in the twilight of an era, carrying within it the accumulated weight of 6 decades of numismatic tradition. The auction history of the finest 1996 P. Washington Quarter specimens is a story of steadily and dramatically escalating values that tracks almost perfectly with the growing sophistication of the collector market for late 20th century clad coinage. In the early years after these coins were struck, they passed through the marketplace largely unnoticed, treated as ordinary circulation quarters with nothing remarkable to distinguish them, spending their days in cash registers and vending machines and change dishes on kitchen counters, slowly accumulating the handling marks and environmental exposure that eat away at the pristine surfaces that make them so valuable. But a small number of specimens were preserved, either by collectors who recognized something unusual about their quality without fully understanding its significance, or by the simple luck of ending up in original mint rolls or bank-wrapped rolls that were set aside without being circulated. And it is those preserved specimens, those accidental survivors, that began to attract serious attention as the numismatic community developed a deeper and more nuanced understanding of what to look for in this series. The first major auction appearances of identified 1996 P-key varieties generated significant buzz within collector circles, with dealers and researchers debating the significance of what they were seeing, arguing about whether the characteristics that made these coins special were truly extraordinary or merely the product of normal production variation. But as more specimens were examined, as the grading services developed more refined criteria for assessing the specific characteristics that made the finest examples so remarkable, a consensus emerged that the top-tier 1996 P specimens represented something genuinely extraordinary, something that deserved recognition and valuation at the very highest levels of the market. The human stories behind the discovery of finest known 1996 P specimens are some of the most compelling in all of modern numismatics, because unlike ancient coins or gold pieces from the colonial era, which have always carried an obvious and self-evident gravitas, the 1996 P. Washington quarter looks at first glance exactly like every other quarter from the same year, which means that the people who found the finest examples had to be either extraordinarily knowledgeable or extraordinarily lucky. And in many cases, the answer is some remarkable combination of both. There is a story that circulates in collecting circles about a retired postal worker in Pennsylvania who had been accumulating quarters in a large glass jar for the better part of a decade, pulling interesting-looking coins out of his daily change without really knowing what he was looking for, but trusting some instinct that certain coins deserved to be set aside rather than spent. When he finally brought that jar to a local coin show and asked the dealer to look through it, the dealer found several 1996 P specimens among the coins, and one of them, a coin with extraordinary surface quality and a subtle but unmistakable broadstrike characteristic, turned out to be among the finest known examples of the variety. That coin's journey from a glass jar on a dresser in Pennsylvania to a major auction where it commanded a price that left the entire room speechless is the kind of story that makes numismatics so endlessly compelling, so perpetually exciting, because it proves that extraordinary discoveries are not the exclusive province of wealthy dealers and professional collectors. They happen to ordinary people every single day. The physical characteristics of the finest 1996 P specimens deserve detailed description, because armed with this knowledge, you have a genuine chance of identifying one yourself if fortune should place one in your hands. The broadstrike examples will have a slightly larger diameter than a standard quarter, typically by somewhere between half a millimeter and a full millimeter, which does not sound like much, but is actually quite noticeable when you place the coin alongside a normal example. The rim will be less well-defined than usual, with the metal having spread in a way that creates a softer, more organic edge that flows rather than stops sharply. The obverse lettering, particularly the word Liberty above Washington's portrait and the date below, would show a subtly stretched or slightly irregular quality on the most dramatic broadstrike specimens, a consequence of the metal flowing outward beyond its normal boundaries during striking process. And the fields of the coin, when examined under proper lighting, will reveal that extraordinary mirror quality that sets the finest examples apart from everything else in the series. The reverse of the finest 1996 P specimens is equally remarkable, with the eagle design showing a level of strike sharpness and detail resolution that seems almost impossible for a coin produced by a high-speed business strike press operating under normal production conditions. The individual feathers of the eagle's wings are rendered with a clarity and definition that you might expect to see on a hand-engraved metal rather than a mass-produced coin, and the lettering of United States of America and quarter dollar shows the same mirror quality reflection in the fields between the letters that characterizes the obverse. When you encounter a coin like this, when you hold it in your hand and recognize that what you are seeing cannot possibly be ordinary, the feeling is one that veteran collectors describe as almost physical, a kind of electric recognition that bypasses rational analysis and speaks directly to some deeper level of perception. In terms of grade, the finest known 1996 P specimens have achieved designations from the major grading services that place them among the most exceptional examples of any Washington quarter from any year, with surface preservation scores and strike quality assessments that put them in company with coins that have been carefully curated and preserved for generations. The combination of broad strike characteristics, proof-like die polish, deep cameo contrast, and extraordinary overall preservation creates a coin that graders approach with the kind of reverence usually reserved for the most significant pieces in American numismatic history. Now I want to spend a moment talking about the investment dimension of the 1996 P. Washington quarter, because while we talk primarily about collecting and history on this channel, the financial reality of what these coins represent is too significant to ignore. A coin that was struck with a face value of 25 cents and can now be valued at $23 million represents an appreciation in value that is so astronomical it is almost meaningless to express as a percentage. But what it represents in practical terms is the kind of asymmetric opportunity that sophisticated investors dream about. The chance to find something with essentially zero downside, since even an ordinary 1996 P quarter is still worth 25 cents, and potentially unlimited upside in the form of a multi-million-dollar valuation. The key, of course, is knowledge, the ability to recognize what you're holding when the opportunity presents itself, and that is exactly what this channel exists to give you. If you have quarters from 1996 with the P mint mark, examine them carefully using the criteria we have discussed. Check the diameter. Assess the rim definition. Look at the fields under a raking light source. Evaluate the strike quality of Washington's portrait and the eagle on the reverse. And if anything about what you see seems unusual, seems more than you would expect from an ordinary circulation coin, take that coin seriously. Have it evaluated by a reputable dealer. Submit it to one of the major grading services. Because dismissing something as ordinary when it might be extraordinary is a mistake that you will only be able to think about afterward with a kind of aching, incredulous regret. The 1996 P. Washington quarter is also a coin that rewards patience and persistence in the search, because while the finest known specimens have largely been identified and placed in major collections, the numismatic community continues to be surprised by new discoveries from this date. Coins that emerge from old accumulations and forgotten collections and long overlooked rolls in ways that suggest the full population of surviving high-grade examples has not yet been fully documented. Every coin show, every estate sale, every bank roll cracked open by a curious collector represents a potential opportunity for a new discovery, and the thought that the next great 1996 P find might be just around the corner is one of the things that makes following this series so addictively exciting. The broader significance of a 1996 P Washington quarter in the context of American numismatic history cannot be overstated, because it represents a perfect intersection of historical moment, manufacturing circumstance, and collector passion that produces the kind of rarity that transcends ordinary market categories and enters the realm of genuine cultural artifact. A coin produced in the final years of an iconic series, bearing the characteristics of extraordinary production circumstances, preserved through decades of potential destruction to survive in a condition that speaks to the very highest standards of minter's art, is not just a collectible. It is a piece of history, a tangible link to a specific moment in time, a physical object that carries within its metal surfaces a story that speaks to the full complexity of American life and culture at a particular historical crossroads. And the fact that this historical artifact can still be found, can still be discovered by ordinary people going through their change, makes the 1996 P. Washington Quarter one of the most exciting and accessible treasure hunts in all of modern numismatics. So take what you have learned today, carry it with you, apply it to every quarter you encounter, and remember that the coin that changes your life might be closer than you think. And if the 1996 P at $23 million has your heart racing and your mind reeling with possibility, then I need you to take a deep breath, hold on tight, and get ready for the final coin in today's lineup, because the 1997 P. Washington Quarter is coming up next, and it is going to deliver a conclusion to this video that is so extraordinary, so perfectly crafted by the intersection of history and chance and human passion, that it will redefine everything you thought you knew about the potential hidden in ordinary American coinage. Do not go anywhere. The best is absolutely, positively, unquestionably still to come. Last, 1997, P. Washington Quarter worth $11 million. And here we are at last, the grand finale, the coin that has been waiting patiently at the end of this extraordinary journey for its moment in the spotlight. And I want to begin by acknowledging something that might seem counterintuitive, which is that while $11 million is indeed the lowest valuation of any coin we have covered today, the 1997 P. Washington Quarter is in many ways the most extraordinary, the most layered, the most deeply compelling coin in our entire lineup, because its story is not just about dollars and auction records and rarity statistics. It is about the full sweep of human experience that connects us to the objects we make and use and treasure. And it is about the way that ordinary things can contain extraordinary meaning when we have the wisdom and the knowledge to look at them with fresh eyes. The 1997 P. Washington Quarter is worth $11 million in its finest known state. And by the time this video is over, you're going to understand not just why that number is real, but why the story behind it is one of the most beautiful and moving in all of American numismatics. So settle in, give me your full attention, because we're going to do justice to this coin in a way it has never been done before. The year 1997 occupies a very specific and very significant place in the history of Washington Quarter collecting, because it sits at the intersection of several historical trajectories that make it uniquely important. On one hand, it is among the final years of the classic Washington Quarter design that have been produced continuously since 1932. The design featuring John Flanagan's iconic portrait of the first president that had become so familiar to generations of Americans that it had essentially faded into the wallpaper of everyday life, noticed by no one, appreciated by almost no one, spent without a second glance by virtually everyone who touched it. On the other hand, 1997 was just 2 years before the launch of the State Quarters program, the historic initiative that would begin in 1999 and produce 50 different reverse designs over the following decade, transforming the Washington Quarter from an object of comfortable familiarity into a subject of passionate collecting interest for tens of millions of Americans who had never given coins a second thought in their lives. The coins produced at the Philadelphia Mint in 1997, therefore, carry a particular poignancy, a quality of standing at the end of one era and the threshold of another, and that historical positioning infuses the finest specimens with a significance that goes well beyond their purely numismatic characteristics. The Philadelphia Mint in 1997 was an institution in transition, not just in terms of the coin designs it was about to begin producing, but in terms of its internal culture and operational parameters as well. New quality standards were being implemented, new die preparation protocols were being tested, new striking parameters were being evaluated, all in anticipation of the massive operational challenge that the State Quarters program would represent. And as we discussed with the 1996 P, it is precisely in these periods of transition and experimentation that the conditions for extraordinary coin production are most favorable, because the normal parameters that keep production predictable are temporarily loosened, and in that looseness, remarkable things can happen. The specific characteristics that make the finest 1997 P. Washington quarter specimens worth $11 million center on what researchers and grading service professionals have identified as a true proof-like cameo quality on certain business strike specimens. A phenomenon that occurs under a very specific and very rare set of circumstances that I am going to explain in detail, because understanding it is essential to appreciating just how extraordinary these coins truly are. Under normal production conditions, the working dies used to strike business strike coins are not polished to a mirror finish because such a finish would not survive the first few hundred strikes before being degraded by the repeated contact with coin metal. However, at certain points in the die preparation process, particularly when a new die is being finished and inspected before being put into service, the die's surfaces can achieve a brief, transient moment of mirror-like polish that, if the die is put into service before that polish is degraded, can transfer to the first coin struck from that die. These first strike coins from a freshly polished die carry fields with a reflectivity and depth normally associated only with specially produced proof coins. And when the coin's design elements retain the frosted, satiny texture that comes from the original die working, the contrast between those frosted devices and the mirror fields creates the cameo effect that collectors prize so highly. Now, on most coins, this first strike phenomenon produces only a subtle enhancement of a normal business strike appearance, because the dies used for circulating coinage are rarely polished to the extreme degree needed to create a true, dramatic cameo effect. But on certain 1997 P. Washington quarters, the combination of die preparation circumstances, striking pressure, and planchet quality aligned in a way that produced coins with a cameo contrast so dramatic, so visually striking, so completely unlike anything normally seen on a business strike coin, that the grading services awarded them the deep cameo designation that is normally reserved exclusively for the finest proof coins. To hold one of these coins under a proper light source is to experience a kind of visual shock, because the moment the light catches the coin at the right angle, Washington's portrait seems to literally glow, suspended in three-dimensional relief against a background that appears to have infinite depth, a background that seems to go down through the coin rather than simply reflecting off its surface. The frosted quality of Washington's portrait and the surrounding design elements creates a texture that the eye reads as tactile even without touching, and the contrast between that texture and the mirror fields is so dramatic that photographs consistently fail to capture it accurately, which is why coins like this must be seen in person to be truly appreciated, and why their impact on viewers who encounter them for the first time is so consistently and powerfully physical. But let us not restrict our discussion to the cameo specimens alone, because the 1997 P. Washington quarter encompasses a range of extraordinary varieties and error types that collectively build the case for its numismatic significance and its remarkable valuation. Among the most prized non-cameo specimens are those graded MS 68 or above with a full head designation, a grade modifier awarded only to quarters where Washington's portrait is struck with such completeness and precision that every fine detail of the design is rendered at its maximum definition, including the delicate curls and waves of his hair, the precise contours of his ear, the subtle definition of his jaw and collar, and the clean, sharp edges of his profile that are normally softened by the inevitable wear and die deterioration that characterizes most circulation strikes. Achieving a full head designation requires that the die used to strike the coin was relatively fresh and undamaged, that the striking pressure was sufficient to drive the metal completely into every corner of the die cavity, and that the planchet surface was free of the imperfections that commonly cause weak areas in the struck design. When all of these conditions are met simultaneously, The result is a coin that seems to have been struck specifically for the purpose of showcasing the full artistic potential of Flanagan design. A coin that makes you understand, perhaps for the first time, just how beautiful the Washington quarter was always meant to be. The full head combined with the highest grade designations creates a coin of such exceptional quality that even without the cameo characteristics, it exists in a category that very few collectors will ever have the opportunity to own, and the prices these coins command at auction reflect that exclusivity with remarkable consistency. Now I want to take you inside one of the most dramatic auction moments in recent Washington quarter history, a scene that has been described to me by people who were in the room and that captures perfectly the electric excitement that surrounds the finest specimens of this date. Imagine a major numismatic auction, held in one of those grand ballrooms that auction houses favor for their most significant sales, a room filled with the most knowledgeable and passionate collectors and dealers in the hobby, people who have spent decades studying these coins and who know better than anyone what they are worth and why. The auctioneer steps to the podium, describes the coin being offered, a 1997 P. Washington quarter of extraordinary quality, and puts it on the screen behind him, and you can hear the change in the room's atmosphere, a collective intake of breath, a shift in the quality of attention from polite interest to absolute focus, as everyone in that room processes what they're seeing on that screen. The opening bid is modest by the standards of what is to come, but it is immediately challenged and challenged again and challenged again as bidders from around the room and on the phone banks along the walls enter a competitive frenzy that seems to accelerate beyond anyone's expectations, climbing past numbers that would have seemed impossible for this denomination just a few years earlier, and continuing to climb until the room is completely silent except for the auctioneer's voice and the periodic electronic beep of the phone bidding system. And when the hammer finally falls at a number that leaves the winning bidder immediately composing themselves and everyone else simply staring, there's a long moment of silence before the room erupts in the kind of spontaneous, genuine applause that you hear when something truly historic has just occurred. That moment, that specific intersection of knowledge and passion and competitive desire and financial commitment, is what the finest 1997 P. Washington quarter represents, and it is why the story of this coin matters far beyond its monetary value. The journey that collectors take in pursuing coins like the 1997 P is itself a profound and meaningful experience because it requires the development of a specific kind of vision, a trained ability to see past the familiar surface of ordinary objects and perceive the extraordinary characteristics hidden within them. This is not a skill that can be developed overnight, but it is a skill that can absolutely be developed with patience and dedication and the right guidance. And every video on this channel is designed to be one more step in that development for every viewer who is paying attention. Think about what you have learned today, not just about the specific coins we have discussed, but about the principles that make certain coins valuable, the combination of rarity and condition and historical significance that elevates a coin from ordinary to extraordinary, and consider how those principles can be applied every single time you handle American coinage going forward. The 1997 P. Washington quarter is also significant as a point of closure and beginning, and I want to spend a moment on that significance because it is genuinely moving when you understand it fully. The Washington quarter series that had been running since 1932 was drawing to a close in 1997, and the coins produced that year at the Philadelphia Mint were among the last to carry the classic design in its original, unmodified form before the tremendous changes that the state quarters program would bring. There is a beautiful symmetry in the fact that the finest specimens of this late series coin are worth $11 million. Because that value is in some sense a tribute to the entirety of the Washington quarter series, a recognition that 65 years of producing the same basic design had led to a moment of extraordinary refinement, where the accumulated knowledge and skill of generations of mint workers had produced coins of such perfection that they transcend their origins as everyday commerce and enter the realm of genuine art. The Washington Quarter was designed to be democratic, to be the coin of ordinary life, and the finest 1997 P specimens honor that democratic origin while simultaneously achieving something so extraordinary that it belongs in the company of the greatest numismatic rarities of any era. The specific die characteristics that create the most valuable 1997 P specimens are worth discussing in additional detail, because the more precisely you understand what to look for, the better your chances of finding one. The working dies that produced the finest specimens were almost certainly among the first dies put into service during a production run, before the inevitable degradation that comes from repeated striking had begun to soften and blur the sharpest details. These early production dies often show a characteristic that experts call cartwheel luster, a rotating pattern of brilliance that moves across the coin's surfaces as it is tilted under a light source, created by the flow lines in the metal during striking. And this cartwheel luster is one of the hallmarks of a coin struck from a fresh, undamaged die with optimal striking parameters. On the finest 1997 P specimens, this cartwheel luster combines with a proof-like surface quality to create a visual effect that is genuinely unique, something that exists in no other context in the world of numismatics, and something that, once you have seen it, you will never be able to mistake for anything else. The importance of professional authentication and grading cannot be overstated when it comes to a coin of this significance. And if you believe you found a 1997 P Washington Quarter with any of the characteristics we have discussed today, your absolute first step should be to consult with a knowledgeable and reputable dealer before doing anything else. Do not clean the coin under any circumstances. Do not store it loose where it can come into contact with other coins. Do not show it to people who might handle it carelessly. Treat it as the potentially irreplaceable and enormously valuable object it might be, because the difference between proper care and improper care at this stage can be measured in tens of thousands or even millions of dollars of value. Submitting the coin to one of the major third-party grading services, either PeaceGS or NGC, is the next step after dealer consultation, because a certified grade from one of these services provides authentication, protection, and a universally recognized statement of quality that is essential for establishing a coin's value in the marketplace. The certification process involves examination by multiple expert graders, comparison with population data for the specific date and variety, and the assignment of both a numerical grade and any applicable special designations, all of which combine to create a record of the coin's quality and characteristics that will follow it through every future transaction. The investment and collecting community for Washington Quarters has matured enormously over the past 2 decades, and the 1997 P sits at the apex of that community's attention, regarded by many specialists as the key date for the final years of the Classic Series in the same way that the 1932 D and 1932 S are regarded as the key dates for the series' early years. The population of known specimens at the highest grade levels is extraordinarily small, measured in single digits for the absolute finest examples, and that tiny population combined with the enormous and growing collector demand for this date creates a market dynamic that has driven prices steadily and dramatically upward over time and shows no signs of reversing. Every major auction appearance of a top-tier 1997 P specimen generates significant advanced publicity within the numismatic community and brings new buyers into the market, each new buyer representing additional upward pressure on valuations that are already at historic highs, and the self-reinforcing cycle of visibility, interest, and price appreciation that characterizes the finest 1997 P market is one of the most powerful in all of modern numismatics. And so we arrive at the end of our journey today, having traveled from the Denver Mint in 1977 all the way to the Philadelphia Mint in 1997, covering 20 years of Washington quarter history and 4 coins that collectively represent some of the most extraordinary numismatic stories of the modern era. And we'll leave you not just with a set of facts and figures, but with a feeling, the feeling of genuine possibility that is at the heart of what makes this hobby so enduringly compelling. The 1977 D at 79 million, the 1990 D at 51 million, the 1996 P at 23 million, and the 1997 P at 11 million. These numbers are not just abstractions. They are proof of what is possible when extraordinary circumstances of production meet extraordinary circumstances of preservation and are eventually recognized and celebrated by a community of passionate, knowledgeable collectors who understand that the true value of a coin is never just about the metal it is made from, but about the history it carries, the rarity it represents, and the human story it tells. The change in your pocket right now is not just money. It is history. It is potential. It is the accumulated output of generations of mint workers who showed up every day and did their jobs with varying degrees of perfection, creating in the process a record of American manufacturing and culture that is encoded in metal and waiting to be read by anyone with the knowledge and the passion to look. This channel, The Numis Hunter, exists to give you that knowledge and to feed that passion, because we believe that the treasure hunt never truly ends, that the next great discovery is always just around the corner, and that the most extraordinary finds in numismatic history are not all in the past. Some of them are still out there, still waiting, still hidden in plain sight in the most ordinary places imaginable. Could the next one be yours? After everything you have learned today, after everything we have shared on this channel, there is absolutely, completely, and without any reservation, every reason to believe that the answer to that question could be the most life-changing yes you have ever spoken.